finally here, the debut live After Maghrib event.
Big names, huge event, all coming together to celebrate the leadership of the giant, Imam Ali alayhi salam.
Jump in, guys, let's go check out the theatre.
Ahmed can't drive to save his life. I'm the first one here at London's Millfield Theatre. Let's go check it out.
Make sure you don't miss the biggest Shia event of the year. Tickets are going fast and you need to make sure you're there.
Hurry up, it's already after Maghrib. Go and grab your tickets for Timeless Resilience now.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode on your favorite Shia Muslim podcast, After Maghrib. If you tuned in last week, you would have noticed I was joined by my 7-year-old daughter, Haneen, who co-hosted with me on that episode. She was nervous, but I think she done remarkably well. And once more, Ahmed is not joining us tonight. I did reference the reason why on the previous episode. He underwent surgery and he's at home and he's recovering, so do remember him, do keep him in your du'as, and inshallah we'll have him back here on the set within the next few weeks. Now, having said all of that, I'm joined by someone who's very dear to me, a good brother, someone who you've all been binge watching his shows, Jum'ah Nights. And if you haven't watched Jum'ah Nights, and inshallah it's the path towards the 7 heavens, Brother Muhammad Ali, assalamu alaikum.
How are you doing? You alright?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well.
For the great introduction to Jum'ah Nights. I hope people are watching it.
No, it's well deserved.
Because obviously it's over, but there's still, inshallah, a lot of benefit, inshallah, to take from it.
How are you feeling?
Alhamdulillah, all good. It's good to be on the podcast again. Obviously, I don't get many opportunities to be here. So, you know, in some ways, you know what they say, a door closes, a window opens.
Allah.
So
I've heard that reference somewhere. No comments. Well, you know, I'm actually excited for today's conversation. Before I introduce who we have on, I just also want to mention that I'm a bit upset because it's our final episode of the season. We've had some amazing conversations over the last few months, and season 3 has been the longest lasting one. So inshallah we see what season 4 holds.
Inshallah.
Bi'idhnillah. Now, joining us all the way from the holy lands of Karbala, the holy lands of Najaf, all the way from Iraq, is someone who's very dear to all of us here after Maghrib, and I'm sure he's no stranger to you at home, wherever you're listening around the world. And that's our amazing scholar, brother and teacher, Sayed Hossein al-Qazwini. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Shalom.
It's a pleasure and honor to be with you tonight.
Thank you for giving us the time from your hectic schedule, I would say, Sayed.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve and to listen and to participate in today's discussion, inshallah.
Ahsantum. Now, Sayed, we want to discuss a number of things today that are very on everyone's minds, if I can say, especially that resonate with our audience. They reach out to us, they message us, and a lot of it is related to addiction, be it in the forms of music, be it in the forms of, you know, adult content, unfortunately, even towards drugs. So there are certain things, inshallah, some elements we want to dive into from a fiqh perspective. But before doing so, I just want to ask a question. Alhamdulillah, you know, you've had an opportunity many of us have never had. And you've had an opportunity that I think many people only dream of. And that is leading congregational prayers in the shrine of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. How does that feel, you know? And is it any different to leading, you know, Jama'ah prayers in a different center and the mosque compared to the shrine of Imam Hussain?
Sure. It is definitely a great honor and a great pleasure to be able to lead Salat al-Jama'ah at the shrine of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. It's a great responsibility, obviously.
Yes.
This is not a chance given to anyone. It's a great responsibility. It's a great obligation. I don't know if I'm worthy. I don't know if I'm up to the responsibility of leading that salah, but it is a privilege that has been given to me at times when my father is because the salah is actually led by my my father,
Sayyid Murtada.
Sayed al-Qazwini. And he's been leading Salat al-Jama'ah for the past 21 years now.
MashaAllah.
From March or April, rather, of 2013 until last night. He's been leading Salah. And in fact, when he started, he would lead morning, Dhuhr, and Maghrib 3 times a day, and give a lecture after Salah.
Yes.
Until as soon as he started, he had a heart attack in Iraq in 2003. We took him to the US, we took him abroad. He had a bypass surgery, and the doctors told him to cut down. So he started to lead only Salat al-Maghrib and Isha, and he delegated for Subh and Dhuhr and Asr to be led by others. But he's been doing so for the past 21 years, and he'd give lectures. During his absence, whenever he's not feeling well, and obviously my father's
Of course.
aging, alhamdulillah, he's in good health. But at times when he needs his rest, or he's not feeling well, or he's abroad, I have the wonderful blessing and opportunity to lead Salah at the shrine of Imam Hussain. And I ask Imam Hussain to put me up, to be able to fulfill this obligation and responsibility that has been put upon my shoulders.
Ahsantum, Sayyidina. Allah bless you and protect your father, prolong his life, inshallah. He's done so much for the community, and you are a living proof of the blessings that he's given to all of us.
Thank you.
Muhammad Ali, where do we begin?
Bro, I think probably the best place to start, and probably the most pressing thing for most youth, if we're looking at the kind of problems that they're facing today, I think the first thing to start with is music.
Okay.
Because I think that's like the one that, is seen as like the smaller kind of sin out of all the things that we wanted to discuss. Like, people see it as something that, it's okay, I'll get over it, I'll stop whenever I can, maybe I'll stop next year, I'll stop in my Haram, I'll stop in Shahr Ramadan. So that's, I think that's the place to start. Go ahead, how do you want to start?
Okay. Can I rephrase that a little, actually? Or just to add to it, forgive me. I would say people do want to stop, and it's a true addiction, and we're surrounded by it. Be it whether we go to the supermarket, we hear music, whether we go to, I don't know, sometimes our friends' weddings, there's music being played, whether we go to, for example, I'm not going to say driving in the car on the radio, but you can be listening to the news on the radio, there's music. So we're surrounded by music wherever we go, whether we choose to listen or not, it's there in the background. We know it's haram, and the majority of scholars do say it's haram. But what I want to know is, why is there a difference, say it, in between, for example, some jurists and some fuqaha say certain instruments are allowed, or for example, no, this entire genre of music is haram. Like, how do they come up with these rulings? And how do we understand that as average laymen, if I can call ourselves?
Sure. Typically, our ulama discuss academically the topic of music in the book Al-Makasib al-Muharrama, which is literally a book on commerce, what is allowed to sell and buy and what is not allowed to sell and buy.
Okay.
And there, the topic of music has come in, and it comes from a Sheikh al-Ansari, Sheikh Mutah al-Ansari, who wrote on Al-Makasib al-Muharrama. He discusses music there, and he discusses it with the point of view of, can you buy a female slave that sings, a singer, a female slave that sings, and then he goes into the topic of music. So that's how the discussion comes into our fiqh discussions. And whoever wrote on Al-Makasib al-Muharrama and taught Makasib al-Muharrama, they followed the footsteps of Sheikh al-Ansari. The narrations and the verses that discuss music, the narrations, it talks about ghina. What is ghina? Here, there's a debate. Yes. And usually scholars, they go back to the linguistic meaning of ghina, which is, they say, طرب الصوت مع الترجيع. So the voice becomes musical. When the voice is musical, when it has a melody to it, and there's a back and forth in the voice where there's a melody, when there's a tune,
like a rhythm,
a rhythm, but not any type of rhythm, because reciting Quran has rhythm as well.
Yes,
there's a melody to it. Adhan has a melody to it. The words play an instrumental role. the words, the content. So the content is usually things that are lustful, talking about a woman's beauty, her hair, her beauty, her fair skin, things that are inappropriate, things that are lustful.
Profanity, violence. So this is like, because we see...
This is new. These
so,
things are new.
yeah, true.
Having
That's
profanity in music, having profane language, violence, this is something new. Previously, music was more of, it was romance.
Okay.
When you mention someone in a romantic way, you describe her hair, you describe her face in an inappropriate way. You describe a female's features. It was put into music. It was put into singing. So the narrations discuss singing, ghina. They don't specifically talk about music as in musical instruments. That also came into play, and there are narrations that discuss musical instruments, alat lahu, and we have fiqh discussions on alat lahu as well. Hence, it goes back to a jurist reading of these narrations and of the verses. For example, the Quran discusses lagw al-hadith, and lagw al-hadith has been explained by the Ahl al-Bayt in certain narrations to mean ghina. Lagw al-hadith is vain talk that has nothing to do with Allah, has nothing to do with religion, doesn't remind you of akhirah. It's very vain. It's very vain.
like lahu.
And it comes from shaitan. Here, when jurists taken these verses and these traditions into consideration, you will arrive at a wide spectrum of views. For example, Sayyid Sadiq al-Shirazi, he views that all types of music and all types of musical instruments are haram, period, without exception. On the other hand, you have, for example, Sayyid al-Khamenei's view on music. And in fact, his dars al-Kharij is on singing and music. Al-Ghina, and he has a published book. He has a bit of a different approach, a more progressive approach to music and singing. He's a bit more lenient, where he says we have to take this into consideration. Lagw al-hadith, that is what was deemed as haram. So if music, even if it incorporates musical instruments and there's singing involved, but it's, for example, on the love of country, the love of your fellow citizens,
Like a national anthem.
Or something on values, family values, the love of country, this is not vain talk, and hence it does not fall in the category of lagw al-hadith. You see, so that could be considered acceptable, and it could be a form of art, fan. It could be a form of art. You see, these traditions that discuss music and singing, we have to take them into their context. What happened was Bani Umayyah, Bani al-Abbas, when they would sit and listen to music and listen to this female slave, al-Jariya al-Mughanniya, who would sing, they would purchase her for her beautiful voice because she would sing. Obviously, we don't have slaves any longer, but this is the context of these narrations. There'd be alcohol involved. There would be dancing involved. There would be a playing of chess. And that takes us to the topic of chess as well, whether chess is halal or haram. Obviously, we have over 60 narrations that discuss chess being haram. But some ulama, they came and said, but it's haram in this sort of context. When there's music, when there's dancing, when there's wine and alcohol involved, and then there's gambling involved. But if you take chess just as a game, as a mind game, that could be a different story. Again, there's different views, and hence there's some ulama that accept chess. I think the moderate view is the view of Sayyid Sistani, where his position on music and singing is quite moderate. He doesn't ban all types of music and singing. For example, background sort of music, elevator music, if you will, military music, what hypes up soldiers. This is not deemed haram. Sayyid Sistani specifically mentions, and before him Sayyid al-Khoi, that music and singing الذي يناسب مجالس أهل الفسق والفجور, singing and music that is befitting of sessions that are inappropriate, full of haram behavior. Again, alcohol, singing, dancing, gambling, that sort of, I mean, if you've
Yeah.
seen
Concerts, nightclubs.
concerts,
This is the
this is new.
Nightclub music.
But previously, when Khulafa, they'd sit with their entourage, and there's a female singer, dancer, alcohol is involved. It's that sort of setting.
Can I ask, Sayed, I've got a couple of specific questions, right? So I've seen some people speak about the topic of music, whether they be scholarly writings or from things that I've read online. They mention specific narrations. So for example, there's a narration where I believe it's Imam al-Baqir. He's asked about ghina specifically. And he says that the individual asks him, is it okay for me to hire a singer, a female singer, for Eid, for example, I think it was Al-Adha and Fitr. And then it also says, and for weddings, for example, Arais, right? And then the Imam says there's no problem with it as long as there is no disobedience that kind of goes along with it, right? And then they'll also present some narrations, for example, to say that, like you mentioned, the context of the, like, you know, the men kind of sitting and watching these women dance and sing, and obviously that being in that context of gambling and so on and so forth, that it mentions that it's okay for you to hire a female singer as long as she is not from the ones from whom men enter upon her.
Right.
Some-
التي يدخل عليها الرجال.
Rijal, sahih. Exactly. So some people take these kinds of explanations and they say that therefore the ma'siyah that is spoken about in the first narration is only that of when it is a promiscuous kind of type of music and stuff, and therefore we'll use that as an excuse to rule out all other kinds of music from being haram.
Right.
Is that kind of reasonable? Do you think that like, for example, as youth, if they were to hear kind of these explanations and take that and say, for example, now if I'm listening to, I don't know, a rapper, for example, and he's from the UK and he's rapping about, I don't know, how hard his life is, right? That context,
Or something political.
exactly. They will say, therefore, even though this is music and this is, you know, like a hard beat and possibly something someone can dance to, it doesn't fall in that context of promiscuity and that kind of thing. Is that not kind of a dangerous line to go down?
You see, it's not necessarily all about promiscuity. First of all, narrations regarding ghina are numerous, and some of them can be conflicting as well. And here it's the job of the jurist, and only the jurist, we can look at these narrations and try to fix any sort of contradiction or conflict between them and reach a conclusion. So to say that music, and this is what Sayyid Hossein have said, that music that is befitting of the majalis of those that are not religious, or a majlis that you know shaitan would be present. It doesn't necessarily have to include alcohol or gambling. Someone would say, what if I go to a concert, there's no alcohol involved and there's no gambling, would that be okay? No, because it's befitting of a majlis that is not religious. You would not see someone religious go to such a sort of concert or place. It's provocative music. It makes you want to dance. It makes you go into this sort of, and that's the whole idea of music, is that it takes your mind off of reality and it gets you to fantasize about a whole nother world. That's the major effect of music, and that's why it's so addictive. But if it doesn't fall in that category, for example, classical music, where classical music is not provocative, it doesn't contain anything vain, it doesn't make you want to get up and dance, some ulama have said that could be an exception. So I would say, I wouldn't tell our dear youth to refer to the narrations, because this is the job of an expert. Only the ulama could do that. Follow the fatwa of the marji' that you follow, because it's a debatable topic. It's quite controversial, and see what your marji' says.
Yeah. The other question I had was with regards to this, the majalis of Ahl al-Fisq wal-Fujur. How objective is that statement? So, for example, if I'm listening to something, is it possible that, for example, I consider this to be something that would be played in a club or something, and
The majority,
the urf,
what is
general people
customary?
say?
Yeah. What would people say? Is this befitting? You see the example that you mentioned of the rapper. The rapper could be talking about politics. Maybe he could be talking about oppression or oppression done to on black people or any people. There's nothing provocative about it. And
So that becomes fine to listen to.
no.
Okay.
Why? Because if someone were to listen to this, it's the beats, it's the rhymes, it's the way of speaking, but it's just the words. It doesn't make it okay. Because what is customary, or the urf would say this sort of rhyme, these sort of beats, this sort of singing, this is befitting of inappropriate sort of majalis. You see? Otherwise, and this I think takes us to another issue of some latmiyat
This is exactly
Oh,
what I was
they
going
come
to
to
come
this,
to.
yeah.
This is exactly what I was going
or
to
mawalid, where it's the same beat, it's the same rhyme, it's just the words have been changed, and all of a sudden now we're talking about Abul Fadl Abbas or Imam Hussain, but it's the same rhyme, it's the same beat, and some of them actually can make you get up and dance or want to get up and dance. So it's not just about the words, but the whole scene has to be taken into consideration. The rhyme, the beats, the words, the lyrics, the way it's being presented, that all has to be taken into consideration.
So with regards to these latmiyat or these mawalid that do kind of contain those kinds of beats and stuff, is there like would you put a shar'i hukum on it, or would you say that, you know, let's just avoid it? Like, is there like a line whereby now this is now like not allowed, this is haram?
If musical instruments are being used and it sounds like music, then it probably is music. I mean, the rhyme, the way the person is singing the latmiya or the mawlud, and there is musical instruments being used, but he's just throwing out religious words, doesn't mean that it's okay. But unfortunately, we haven't discussed this enough, and some ulama have avoided addressing this topic straight on.
Yeah.
Where it's caused a bit of controversy or confusion, and that's why some youth they see it as an outlet or as a replacement to music, but it's fleeing from music to music. We have to be very careful, and I think that it puts a huge responsibility on the shoulders of these rawadid to be very careful not to make it into music, because you're changing the words, but the rhymes, the beats, the way you're presenting, the way you're saying it, it could sound like music, and if it sounds like music, it could be music.
It's very interesting. I've got so much questions in my head, but I say just to stay on this just a bit more. Speaking about latmiyat, you gave the example area of some maraji' who say all instruments are not allowed. But for example, if we come back to say Sayed al-Shirazi, for example, he allows certain instruments when it comes to latmiyat, such as I think a naqara, a drum, something we call tas. And how come specifically for the Ahl al-Bayt these are allowed when it comes to latmiyat?
I haven't seen his ruling, but I would assume that if it falls under the category of الشعائر الحسينية,
Yeah.
الشعائر الحسينية, and so now the subject matter has changed. The موضوع has changed. It's no longer music. It's no longer provocative. It's no longer befitting of majalis ahl al-fisq wal-fujur, befitting of the gatherings of non-religious people, but rather it's being used in a religious sort of sense, and for the purpose of Husseini rituals, then the Sayyid might have made an exception. Again, I'm trying to find a justification for that ruling. I'm trying to see where he comes from. So this could be a possibility of where he comes from.
Okay.
How about, so he mentioned, for example, drums and things like that.
Drums.
So going back in history, of
Ahsant.
course, there's the context. to
We
what they've been-
have narrations and we have historical evidence where when the army would go out to the battle, there were drums played. There were some musical instruments were played to hype up the soldiers, and it has an effect. It has an effect on them psychologically, mentally, where it hypes them up for battle. So if it's used in that sort of context, then it would be okay.
Is this like what we see in like Zafat al-Qasim?
Sent
yeah,
correctly. That sort of, I mean, typically today they wouldn't be considered musical instruments, but at the end of the day, drums are musical instruments. Using a hornet is a musical instrument, but it's in this sort of line of للشعائر الحسينية. It's not meant to be provocative. It's not meant to get you to dance. It's in this sort of, so that's how some ulama come to justify the usage of these instruments.
Interesting.
Anything to add?
Nah, I'm
Okay,
done, I think.
I think let's put music for a side now. I think I've benefited a lot from this. It's changed a lot of things I had in my mind.
Alhamdulillah.
I think let's move to the other addictions, which are drugs.
Yeah.
In particular, say weed, cannabis. This is a big problem, especially here in the UK, in the Western world, where we see it affects every community, and the Muslim community is not far away from this. Yani sometimes we can go to centers, even like during the nights of Muharram or during other type of majalis. Sometimes we can smell it coming from people. It's happening. There's drugs in people's home. Parents don't know how to deal with it. And normally they're teenagers. And when I say teenagers, I'm talking about 15, 16, 17. And they find a way of justifying this. They say, for example, I've heard some very funny justifications. It's a plant by Allah. The cannabis plant, it's like a herb. I don't know. They compare it to za'atar. I don't know. But they say it doesn't harm anyone. I'm not harming no one. Why should I stop it? It makes me feel better. It makes me focus. In fact, I've heard people, God forbid, who smoke cannabis and then go to Latmiya, so they can do Latin for 3 hours. What do we say about all of this? Like,
Also, I just wanted to also add on top of this, right, that there was even like religious justifications given in some cases where I've seen there was a fatwa being kind of shared around of the late Marja, Sayyid Sadiq al-Rawhani, where he was asked with regards to a number of things. He was asked about hashish, he was asked about art, he was asked about a number of things in a list, and he responds by going down the route of not discussing it from a primary hukum. He discusses it from a secondary hukum, in the sense that if it's israf of money, if it's harm, if it causes fuqdan al-aql, he mentions in one of the things. All of these things, he spoke about it secondarily. And then he says, without the presence of these things, there would be no problem with it, for example. And many people started to share this around and start to say, therefore, as a primary hukum, that they wouldn't consider cannabis to be an intoxicant the same way that, for example, alcohol is, and therefore it's okay. Right. So I've seen loads of people, and obviously in our time as well, very unfortunately, with taqleed and the kind of rulings that people take, there's a lot of, astaghfirullah, playing around, if you could say. There are some marajit that will say to you, you don't need to follow the a'lam, you can follow multiple opinions from different marajit, and you'll see these individuals, they will follow Sayyid Rawhani in specifically this ruling, for example, and use that to justify it. How do you kind of navigate these things, especially because even me growing up, I've seen people destroy their lives due to their reference to this fatwa. Right. It's not a thing that they've just come up with. Sure. They're saying this is the deen, this is a marja, this is a fatwa.
It's the first time I heard this. Sure.
So we have primary laws and secondary laws. Yes, when it comes to a primary law, for example, on weed and cannabis, we might not find a straightforward narration that says it's haram. Those who do say it's haram, they come from the narrations that discuss alcohol and wine. They say that wine became haram, is forbidden because it's an intoxicant. So we know the justification of the ruling, because it's an intoxicant. And if weed and cannabis is also intoxicating, hence it becomes haram. And we know that because alcohol and wine has been forbidden. So cannabis and weed has not been mentioned in narrations. So as a primary law, some could see it as haram because it's similar to wine and alcohol. Others say, no, we don't know the reason behind the ruling. Narrations don't tell us that wine is forbidden because it's an intoxicant. It just tells us it's forbidden. Yes, we know that it's an intoxicant, but that is one thing. Knowing that it's an intoxicant is one thing. Knowing the rule, knowing the justification behind the ruling is another. Maybe because It could destroy economies, maybe because it could become addictive. There could be numerous reasons, and hence maybe the fatwa of Sayyid Sadiq Rouhani comes under that category of we don't exactly know the justification behind, and hence the primary ruling is that it's lawful. But as a secondary ruling is that it is harmful. It's harmful to the health. It's harmful to the brain. It's harmful to society. It's a waste of money. It's addictive. It could destroy lives. It could destroy families. I mean, imagine driving under the influence. And so because it's harmful, this becomes then a secondary ruling because it's harmful. If it wasn't harmful, that'd be another case. But because it's harmful, it becomes haram. This is from a fiqh perspective. From a social perspective, it's something that's very addictive, and unfortunately today it's becoming legal in a lot of countries. The buying and selling, especially for medicinal purposes, and it doesn't take much to have a medicinal purpose. It's becoming legal in a lot of countries, and hence you see the widespread usage of such a drug. But it's very addictive. It's hard to leave once you've started, and it affects your schoolwork. It affects your work. It affects your it affects your life, and it's a waste of money at a time when youth need to save up money to prepare for marriage, to pay off college payments, university payments. It could be destructive, and that should be the message, to stop, because it could be destructive to your social life, to your health, and it should be avoided.
So do you mind commenting on just with regards to what I was mentioning about tab'id and kind of like what I would call fatwa shopping, right? In the sense that of course even the maraja that I have seen that allow this, they make it a very nice clause at the end to say that don't let your kind of whims and desires guide you in the like kind of rulings that you choose to take from numerous fuqaha. How would you address this in terms of, like, how can you be sure that you are not following your whims and desires, and how can you try and stay away from that if you are exposed to, for example, these concepts like tab'id, and you do see a fatwa, for example, that allows something that you feel like you want to do, for example? How would you navigate that kind of?
First of all, when it comes to taqleed, we have the condition of a'lamiyya, following the most knowledgeable, and this is a fatwa that the majority of our scholars have agreed upon, that you have to follow the most knowledgeable. And if we are able to discern the most knowledgeable marja, we cannot abandon his fatwa and go to another ruling. Yes, there's something else. There's another possibility of having different maraja, each one being a'lam, being the most knowledgeable in different fields. And this is something discussed in Al-Urwatul Wuthqa by Sayyid al-Yazdi, and Sayyid al-Khoi also mentions this in his discussions on ijtihad and taqleed, where, for example, one jurist is more knowledgeable in ibadat, another jurist is more knowledgeable in muamalat. Here you would have to do tab'id. You would have to divide your taqleed into who's most knowledgeable. So theoretically, there could be 10 jurists, and each one of them has his expertise in one field and is the most knowledgeable in that field. One is the most knowledgeable in hajj, another is most knowledgeable in commerce, another is more knowledgeable in fasting. You could divide up your taqleed and emulation to follow each one in his expertise. If he's not the most knowledgeable, and the most knowledgeable is just one jurist, most scholars would not allow performing tab'id. There are some ulama that say a'lami is not a condition. You do not have to follow the most knowledgeable. Today, if you need a doctor, you don't go searching for the most knowledgeable doctor. You find a suitable doctor, a doctor that has done his homework, that's been through medical school, that knows what he's talking about or she is talking about. And as long as that expert is someone reliable and trustworthy, you can rely on them on their fatwa, and hence you could rely on a number of experts, and you could perform tab'id depending on in various matters. Again, this is not a popular fatwa. This is a fatwa of some that allow tab'id and do not hold a'lamiyya to be a condition for taqleed. The majority, like I said, they see a'lamiyya, following the most knowledgeable, as a condition in taqleed.
Okay. When you speak about a'lamiyya, like when we think about it, when we say, the most knowledgeable, if we were to take the example of any other science, if I was to say, who is the most knowledgeable professor in chemical engineering in the world, right? Many people would say that's a very subjective question. How can you determine who is the most knowledgeable, right? So, and of course, we have the rulings with regards to, going towards Ahl al-Khibra, asking the people that can identify the most knowledgeable. But very often we see that, for example, if we go to a certain group of scholars, they have their circle, for example, or the scholar that they have kind of studied with, and they may say, for example, he is the most knowledgeable. And then you have the rulings that say if you find two Ahl al-Khibra that kind of go against that, then you need to kind of do more research and those kinds of things. So how does it work? Like, how can you actually come to a conclusion on who is the a'lam if there are Ahl al-Khibra in many different circles calling 15 different maraji' to be the a'lam?
Sure. So, in discerning who's the most knowledgeable in fiqh, we'd have to go to the experts in fiqh, and they are the Ahl al-Khibra, those who are well versed in the lectures, the books, the theories of contemporary ulama, living maraji', who have the ability of comparing and contrasting between the theories of ulama. The problem is when there's conflicting reports. So one or two from Ahl al-Khibra, they say it's so-and-so alim, marji' is the most knowledgeable. And then you have other experts from Ahl al-Khibra claiming to have, to believe that another marji' is the most knowledgeable. If there's no conflict, you could rely on one individual, one expert. And all it takes is one expert or two to perform taqleed of who they believe is Ahl al-Khibra. If you are from Ahl al-Khibra, if you have the ability to distinguish, if you have, if you're well versed in fiqh, usul, and rajal, if you have the ability to discern who is most knowledgeable, then so be it. If not, you'd have to refer to an expert. If there's conflicting reports, what would happen is now there's a small circle of, for example, 5 jurists. So these two, they say it's scholar A. These other two, they say it's scholar B. These three, they say it's scholar C. But no one is saying it's scholar D, E, and F.
Okay.
So we know that the a'lam is in this circle of scholar A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Here ulama say, as long as you know that the a'lam is amongst these 3, these 5, these 10, then you could choose one of them. You could choose one of them. But if 2 of them have a conflicting fatwa, you would have to perform ihtiyat, if possible. So for example, one of them says gelatin is halal, the other one says it's haram. You'd have to perform precaution, meaning you'd have to choose the hardest fatwa, if possible. If it wasn't possible, then you could go with either one of them.
Amazing. That's a lot of kind of nuance and complexity in that. And I think that if you were to, obviously in the UK, I don't think many people think about taqleed in that kind of depth, right? You just kind of go with whatever your mosque follows to make life easy for you on Eid. You know what I mean? Right. But yeah, it's very interesting to hear that there's that much nuance and complexity in these rulings.
That was a solid question. Amazing answer, Sayed.
Thank you.
So I just want to step away slightly from addiction, but staying on the subject matter, which is drugs and things. People say, honestly, if there's any truth in this, people tend to say that, I've seen this from certain people, where they pray part-time, for example. Why? Because they had a joint, for example. And they say, I'm negus, I'm spiritually impure for 40 days. Allah's not going to accept my prayer, He's not going to accept my psalm, not even accept my du'as. And they abandon prayer.
Because of what?
They say salah is not accepted for 40 days if they take drugs or something. Is there any truth in this? And if so, if the salah is not accepted, does it mean they don't have to pray?
See, there's 2 matters.
Okay.
One is the validity of a salah, and 2, its acceptance. The acceptance of a salah, that's not in our hands. That's in the hands of Allah. Someone could be pure, have purity, have performed wudu, ghusl, has done his salah correctly, and it's valid, but it's not necessarily accepted. Not every salah that is valid is accepted. Yes, every salah that is accepted is usually
valid,
valid. Usually is valid, unless subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, someone who's doesn't have knowledge, someone simple, and even his prayer is broken, but Allah will accept the salah. So they're not mutually exclusive. But to say that I don't have purity, well, you can wait. You can wait until the intoxicant, right, is out of your system, and you pray. I think they're just looking for an excuse not to pray.
Yeah.
They're just looking for an excuse not to pray. Abandoning salah is a cardinal sin. To differentiate between a Muslim and a kafir, it's salah. Salah is the line between a Muslim and a kafir. To leave your salah for several days with making excuses that I'm not pure, this is just completely unacceptable. What they have to do is they pray. They have to pray. First of all, avoiding intoxicants, praying. Whether that salah is accepted or not, that's not up to them. It's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to decide whether that salah is accepted. They can't be the judge and say, well, as long as my salah is not accepted, I'm not going to pray. No, you have to pray. Pray a valid salah and leave the rest on Allah Azza wa Jal.
Yeah, they're solid. I obviously it's like you said, because there's the verse in the Quran, you know, don't approach prayer while you're in a state of intoxication.
In fact, this verse,
Sakara, that one.
لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى. This verse has been debated as to what it means, and there's a good amount of scholars that say sukara means intoxicated. Do not pray while you're intoxicated. And their justification, they say that when in Islam alcohol was banned, it came into stages. Islam did not ban alcohol from day one. First, the Quran ridicules alcohol and didn't ban. تتخذون منه رزقا حسنا. So the Quran, it talks about a couple of materials or plants where this is a good sustenance, but when it mentions grapes used for wine, it doesn't mention it as good sustenance. So this was the first step. The second step was don't approach salah when you're intoxicated. لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى. And then finally, in the third stage, إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه. Avoid. That was the third and final stage. And their justification is that because drinking alcohol and wine was so widespread in the Arabic culture during the days of Jahiliyyah, that they simply would not have converted to Islam. If Rasulullah had told them from day one, don't drink, none of them would have converted. Plus, Islam was a revolution. Islam was meant to change these people. And any change has to come in stages. It can't come all at once. It has to come in stages. There's another explanation to that verse of لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى, which is, and we have narrations from Ahlul Bayt that say, don't approach salah when you're sleepy. Sukara, yeah, it's metaphoric to say don't pray while you're in a deep state of sleepiness. Rather, make sure that you're awake, you're aware of what you say, so that you understand what you're saying. And it's not referring to intoxicants, because the Quran mentions, for example, on the Day of Judgment, وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى. You see them intoxicated, but they're not intoxicated. So the Quran does sometimes use the word sukara in places where there's no alcohol involved.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Amazing points.
Thank you.
Sayed, I think we can end the topics on the addictions, but as a final point on addiction, if someone is addicted to any of these things, let's say music, drugs, drinking, God forbid, even now we see the world of pornography, there's a lot of addictions that are affecting the Muslim community. How do we overcome this? How can we stay away from this? Or how can we train and discipline ourselves? I think not just saying, inshallah, one day I can quit this, but no, what steps should one take as a Muslim, as a Shia, to stay far away from it?
I think especially with regards to adult content, because I think this is a problem that is actually very widespread. Like even growing up in school and things, you'd hear a lot of conversations about these kinds of things, especially with regards to masturbation. Huge problem in our communities. It's something that a lot of people don't address, of course, but it's a problem. Like there's very few people that have been able to stay away from this subject altogether.
By the way,
Like,
just on that point, you know,
Yeah.
there's schools now in the UK that are saying that that's act of self-pleasure, for example, is beneficial to your health. So
honestly,
there's a
bro, that's not new. Even when I was growing up, I remember I was in year 5. Yeah, I don't know how
5,
old you are.
10
in year
years
5.
old.
10 years old, and I was told, and I remember them showing us, like, you know, graphics and things like that during the time where they teach you about these things.
Okay.
And they told us, if you hear that somebody did this, don't bully them, don't say anything bad to them. It's okay. There's no problem with it. There's no problem with masturbation. It's something very normal. And that was when I was growing up. That was I mean, not too long ago, but you know, you get the point. And it was, I remember it was
still
that
young.
very weekend that I went to madrasa, alhamdulillah, and they had a worksheet and they were speaking about this and they underlined it. Masturbation is haram, underlined, stay away from it. And they mentioned many narrations saying that, you know, our Shia are not from those that do this, so on and so forth. And I remember that was ingrained in my mind, alhamdulillah. But, you know, that was a thing even back then, that they were normalizing it. They normalize it, you know, that's how it is to them.
Absolutely.
Can I just add, before you guys move on to the discussion, that not only is like that side of it, but also the normalization on the internet of like the social media is created for this sort of content now, and even on Twitter, it's like it comes up more than the content that you actually want.
100%.
so you're constantly
Constantly.
you're bombarded. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, every tweet now you go under and actually say that maybe this is a reason not to come back to Twitter. But inshallah, we do see you back. Inshallah, we do want to see you on Twitter. But every kind of funny tweet that you'll see under it,
There's something inappropriate.
something very inappropriate. Always, like now, it's become a thing on Twitter. So it's become very normalized on social media as well.
Right. First of all, we believe that Allah Azza wa Jal has given human beings a strong will and a strong sense of determination. If someone is determined and has the will to stop from an addiction, they can. At the end of the day, we have free will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not forced us in doing what we do. A human being has the will to topple a government, to topple a regime. You know, not just, you know, stop from an addiction. Yes, addictions can be difficult to stop from. It's the way the brain works. I'm not an expert. This takes us into psychology. Obviously, there's triggers. Even, for example, smoking. Those who want to stop smoking, sometimes it's a trigger that gets them to come back. I've seen some that stop, but because of a trigger, it could be a sign, a billboard that triggers them. So with any sort of addiction, it could be a picture, it could be a post, it could be a video on social media. And what you're saying is very real, and it's very dangerous. Those are triggers. So even if some youth want to stop, but they're being triggered. But at the end of the day, we believe that we have a strong will. We have self-determination. Listen, with the issue of pornography and masturbation, I don't care if they say it's healthy. I've heard from a Muslim Shi'i doctor, physician, but he says it's good for you. It's healthy. I don't care.
No way.
It could have detrimental social effects. It could affect your marital life. What a lot of dear youth have to understand is that if it becomes an addiction, it will be hard to stop even once you're married. Now that you have a spouse and you're meant to have sexual gratification through your spouse, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, and it's something very natural. But if it becomes addictive and you let that addiction take over you, even when you're married, some would prefer self-gratification over
Intimacy with the
intimacy with your spouse. It could destroy your marital life. It could develop problems between spouses, between a husband and wife, regardless who is dealing with addiction, and it will take a toll. It will take a toll on your life. It could take a toll on your marital life, and hence it's best to stop as soon as possible. The faster, the merrier, because the longer this addiction prolongs, it could take a toll on your marital life, and it's very much possible. It's very much possible. Why would the narrations forbid such an act and such a behavior, because it is possible for a human being to stop from any sort of addiction, whether it's this addiction or any sort of addiction.
Coming back to fatwa on this issue, there was quite a controversial fatwa with regards to masturbation on the female side within Shia scholarship that I've seen many people speak about. And the fatwa was saying that the masturbation that is spoken about in the narration specifically refers to men, and that the women are not kind of, indicated in these narrations or in these reports. Therefore, it's salat al-ibaha, right? Therefore, it's okay.
Correct.
Now, or it's okay as long as you do not reach the point of climax or something along these lines, right?
Correct.
So this fatwa was very, very kind of widespread. Many people saw it. How would you kind of it's again, we're coming back to the same topic, right? Because there always will be these a fatwa that is kind of different to the mashhur,
Sure.
is different to the ma'ruf, but
should we
then many
interpret
people will use it and they'll take it.
So
Ila
this,
mashallah.
this fatwa did stir controversy, but there were a few rebuttals to it. And in fact, I have an article that I wrote in Arabic addressing this fatwa. So the narrations that forbid masturbating, they address men. Women are not mentioned in those narrations. It addresses men and it forbids men from performing such a behavior. But we have a very clear verse in the Holy Quran, which is very clear, and it applies to both men and women. And the verse says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. In describing believers, those who guard their private parts. And the verse is not just talking about men, it's speaking about men and women. إِلَّا عَلَىٰ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ. Except they guard their private parts, except with their spouses. And this verse, according to most ulama, it's speaking to both men and women. And protecting private parts is from all sorts of sexual gratification, whether it's with someone or by oneself, whether it's with someone from the opposite gender or from the same gender. So this verse is very broad, very general, and it's enough to say that it forbids both genders from this sort of behavior.
So just on the point of, we've referenced pornography quite a few times here. We live in a day and age where our society is hypersexualized, Sayed. Even like in school settings, workplaces, educational buildings, governmental ads, billboards on trains and buses or shopping centers. Every part of society is hypersexualized. I've even seen a trend, say, even it's affecting the Muslim community, where they use Muslim sisters to sell products in a seductive way so that it converts to sales and more people place orders and increase their revenue. And it's affecting us in many, many ways. And teenagers, unfortunately, they have to live through that, and it's challenging for them. And it's something that I think they do battle. They know that this is haram, but then sometimes they're told, like, if you want to chase your desire, there is an alternative. And I think this can lead us towards, if we can spend a few moments discussing temporary marriage, Sayyidina, where there's those who encourage temporary marriage to stay away from haram. And there are those who say don't even enter the world of temporary marriage because it's a form of, a'udhu billah, prostitution. Everyone has their own opinion on this matter. A few months ago, Sayyidina, we sort of tried to discuss the abuse of temporary marriage. So I don't want to take it in that route. I don't want to say what people do is wrong or what people do is right. But I think, as I spoke a bit earlier with Brother Muhammad a few hours ago, when it comes to temporary marriage, there are certain fiqh questions that we want to know. One is, I think if we can begin here, the majority of us have an understanding, for example, if a female wants to, let's say, take on temporary marriage, she needs to seek the permission of her father. There are some jurists or fuqaha who say,
Virgin.
yeah, that's not the case. You don't need to seek permission if you meet a certain criteria. It's a confusing world for many. It's definitely questions I think we see a lot being asked, not to the right people. So they're asking people who don't know the answers because they're too shy to ask the scholars. I think it's an opportunity that we can address
Sure.
some of these today, Sayed.
So, in our school of thought,
Yeah.
temporary marriage in itself, the concept is allowed. We believe that it was it's been mentioned in the Holy Quran in Surah An-Nisa, and it was practiced at the time of Rasulullah. It was practiced by the Sahaba, but it was a certain individual who banned, and that was Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Khalifa. He put a ban on the practice of temporary marriage. But in our school of thought, it is allowed under certain conditions. On the female side, there's a debate whether does she require her father's permission or she does not. The vast majority of our ulama require the permission of the father, otherwise this temporary marriage would not be allowed, and it would not be valid. Also, this is also a debate. Is it invalid, or are you just performing haram but the marriage is valid in itself? So we have some ulama, like for example Sayed Hossein al-Amili, who stated the marriage itself is valid but you're performing something haram, while others like Sayed Hossein, for example, he'd say no, the marriage in itself is invalid. There is other scholars that say if a woman is independent, she's old enough, she's mature, she's wise, she's independent meaning she works, she makes her money, financially independent, she buys, she sells, she can travel without permission, she's independent, she doesn't need anyone's permission in all other affairs or all other matters. Well, in this case, she wouldn't need her father's permission, except if she were to perform such a marriage, intercourse would not be allowed. And this was the fatwa of the two late jurists, Sayyid Sadiq al-Ruhani and Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim. If she's a virgin, but she's independent, she buys, she sells, she's financially independent, Rashida, Aqila, it is permissible, but with the condition of intercourse not being allowed.
Okay. Oh no, I'm interested to hear that. I know that Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim did say that. I was under the impression that Sayyid al-Ruhani didn't have any
No, he did as well. Sayyid Sadiq al-Ruhani, this was his fatwa as well. But as Sayyid Sistani, for example, he doesn't allow. If she's a virgin, no matter how old she is, she could be up to 30 years old, of age or more than 30, even if she's independent financially. But as long as she's a virgin, she has to have the permission of her father. At the end of the day, this is a marriage. It's a marriage. It should not be compared to any sort of haram behavior and act.
Yeah.
It's a commitment. It's a aqd. It's a contract between the man and the woman. It's based on commitment. It's based on mutual respect and acceptance of this behavior. So it is a marriage. To compare it to prostitution, to compare it to haram dating, this is simply not right. This is a marriage, and if there was a child conceived, that child would be a legitimate child, except it's timed.
Yeah,
it's a timed marriage. It has a certain time, and it is legal. It's a way of avoiding haram, and it's an outlet if youth have that need, and many of them do. Why perform haram when there's a religious basis for it? Again, by following the conditions, by following the rules and conditions based on the different maraji'.
So many people, they tend to focus on the negatives of temporary marriage, but I think there are some positives, and I think maybe we can touch on a few. One is, for example, when it comes to getting to know a potential spouse. Normally, like especially in our communities, this is something that's practiced so that you can get to know them better and make a decision comfortably yourself. So we do see in times where, for example, temporary marriage is not just used for, let's say, someone chasing their desires. It can be used for other things.
Like everything else, it has its pros and cons. I would say one of the cons is that it pushes away or delays permanent marriage. When some youth, whether be it male or female, when they practice temporary marriage, they don't feel the need of settling down because their intimate needs are being met, and sometimes they get used to such sort of marriage, and it becomes very convenient, and so permanent marriage gets pushed back to the 30s, maybe mid 30s, maybe even more. While it's not something haram, it's not something forbidden, but at the end of the day, every person wants to start a family. You need a lifelong partner.
Islam focuses on family.
Ahsant, and you want to raise kids. So this could be one of the cons. So what I would suggest is that if you can hold off, and if you can get married permanently, why go for something temporary? Get married permanently. Start a family, find a spouse where you can live with forever. If that is not an option, for you this is not an option, you have financial burdens, or because of your studies, because you know you can't get married now, and you know that you will fall into haram, then this is an option, and in fact it becomes mandatory now. It becomes mandatory, because permanent marriage is not an option. Falling into haram is not an option as well. This becomes your only option. So it varies from case to case.
So it becomes, in a way, wajib, afwan, because to save you from haram.
Correct.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Also, I just wanted to add, there's also narrations that many people share with regards to the specific topic of temporary marriage. And I just wanted, if possible, if you could share some light or some context on these narrations, because some people may come across these narrations and see temporary marriage as something very recommended, for example. So, for example, there are some narrations, I believe even in Wasail, where it mentions that the Imam puts a lot of emphasis on reviving the sunnah of Mutah. To some extent, even some narrations where he says, I don't like for any of my Shia to die without reviving this sunnah, right? Is there a specific context in which these narrations were said, and a context that need to be kind of kept in mind when we're looking at these narrations?
Yes.
And how would you kind of put that into the mind of a layman individual reading these narrations?
We have lots of narrations on temporary marriage, and some of them encourage, some of them discourage. And again, this goes back to what we said in the beginning, that this is the job of a jurist to deal with these narrations. Otherwise, if it's left for the lay people to pick and choose, sure, there's a narration that encourages, there's another narration that discourages. I think temporary marriage can fall under the spectrum of the 5 different laws of being wajib at times, haram at times, mustahab at times, makruh at times, and neutral. So, for example, if it becomes the only outlet where if you do not practice it, you will fall into haram, some ulama would say it becomes wajib. If it becomes a reason to doubt our school of thought, or it makes our school of thought demeaning, or it brings disrespect to the school of thought of Ahl Bayt, some would say it becomes haram, because it brings a backlash to faith. In some cases, it could be mustahab, if it is done with the intention of reviving that tradition and disobeying, the individual, challenging the individual who banned with that sort of intention. That person banned, but I challenge that person because he destroyed one of the sunnahs of Rasulullah, one of the traditions of Rasulullah, and I want to revive that tradition. Here it becomes mustahab. If it affects your marital life, if the person is married and it affects his marital life, here it could become makruh. We have narrations where Imam Sadiq would tell his companions that as long as you're in Al-Haramain, Mecca and Medina, and you come to my house, I forbid you from practicing mut'ah or temporary marriage. I forbid you. Here he made it haram. While in some cases, he would push his companions to perform it. It depends on the context. You see, it's not, no 2 cases are the same. It depends on the context. Does it bring any harm? Does it have any advantage? Are you running away from haram? Or it could actually put you into haram. Or it could destroy your family. It could destroy your wife. It could take a toll on. All of these cases have to be taken into consideration. And our ulama have done a good job in explaining these different scenarios. So to come and say temporary marriage is mustahab, well, it can be mustahab, yes, you're right, but it could also become makruh as well, depending on the case and circumstance.
Amazing. MashaAllah.
I've got a final question from me, probably the final one for me on this episode as well. Just coming to that point of the 5 different scenarios you gave, they have their challenges. The point where you mentioned, if you indulge in temporary marriage, it can affect your permanent marriage.
Yes.
How should women feel in a way? I just want to say, because we have many challenges here in the UK where we have, alhamdulillah, the community is blessed with many marriages, many amazing marriages, successful marriages, long-lasting marriages, but then we see men indulge in temporary marriage. I wouldn't say neglecting their spouse, but just to them they say, oh, I'm allowed, so who cares what you think? Is this a right mentality to have?
First of all, in Islam, polygamy is allowed, or polygyny is allowed. The same question should be posed regarding marrying a second wife or a third wife. This is something that Islam has allowed, and we don't shy away from this. It's something that is mentioned in the Holy Quran. It's something that is allowed. And at the same time, temporary marriage for a married man has been allowed. At the same time, we have narrations that say if you have a wife, try not to go towards this outlet unless it's necessary, unless you see yourself falling into sin. For example, you're traveling, or you have a circumstance at home where your intimate needs are not being met. Then this should be the exception to the rule. It should not be the rule itself. It should be the exception. Is it allowed? It's allowed. But try not to choose this option. And there are some narrations that say, especially if you see that your woman, your wife, might reach the stage of kufr, disbelief, that Islam is catering to your needs, to men's needs, and not our needs. Of course, my advice to the dear sisters is that you have to have strong faith. At the end of the day, this was made permissible by Allah Azza wa Jal, and we can't question the laws that are made by Allah.
Of course.
And Allah knows best. Allah knows men. Allah knows women. He knows the structure of men. Men and women are very different. Men and women are very different. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given women a lot of patience. The needs of women are not less than men. We have narrations that a woman's sexual desire is a lot more than a man's sexual desire. In fact,
9/10.
9/10. A man has 1/10 of the desire that a woman has. But a woman has 9/10 of patience. And a man has 1/10 of patience. So Allah has given her sexual desire, but He's given her a lot of patience. Whereas men, this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made them, and to that they can't be too. It's a need. It's a need, just like to eat and drink. Some women don't understand this because they come from a female perspective. She says, if I can wait, if I have the patience to wait, why can't he? It's a bit different. And so Islam has put that option on the table, but only when necessary. Only when necessary. It's like owning a gun at home. Does that mean you're going to use it every day? No. You put it for emergency cases. Only for emergency cases, you put it in that secret cupboard. It's for those cases where you feel you will fall into the trap of shaitan and you will commit sin. Islam says no. Don't commit a sin. There's a legal outlet. But should that become an addiction? Should that be the rule and you neglect your wife? No. Islam has kept a very strong balance. Do not neglect your wife. Do not neglect her intimate needs. She also has needs. And if God forbid she's neglected, God forbid, she'll go in a different direction.
So I've heard, just on that point, that for example, if her needs are not being met, she can have a right for divorce. Am I correct in this or no?
Partially, yes. If a wife's intimate needs are not met,
4 months, right?
4 months. 4 as in FOR, not FOUR.
Oh, okay.
See, that's another debate as to what is a woman's right to intimacy. Most ulama say it's once in 4 months. While today there are several ulama, several maraja today that have contested this rule. It's based on one narration, the 4-month law of intimacy. It's based on one narration, and it's taken out of context. I've seen the narration. It has a sahih isnad. If I'm not mistaken, Sahihat Yunus, where he asks Imam Rida that if a man does not meet the needs of his wife for 4 months, not because he wants to hurt her, because there's a tragedy.
Okay.
Underline the word tragedy. Maybe his mother died, his father died, he got in an accident, he lost his job. Psychologically he can't, mentally he can't. The Imam says he's okay as long as it's less than 4 months. Some ulama, they said, okay, well, we discover from this narration that a woman's right to intimacy is 4 months. While there's other ulama that say, no, the Quran is very clear. وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. A man and a woman have very similar rights and duties. So just the same way that a man expects intimacy upon need, so does the wife. The Quran is saying their rights and duties are equal. And even if we don't look at this verse, there are other verses. وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with them according to what is customary. What is customary is not 4 months. What is customary is upon need. It's upon need. At the end of the day, we don't discuss this because it's very sensitive.
Yeah.
But a woman has needs. Maybe sometimes more than the man. But they don't say it. And this is not discussed. So for a man to neglect his wife and go and meet his own needs, satisfy his own needs, maybe he might not be committing a sin in satisfying his needs, but he's definitely committing a sin in not satisfying the needs of his wife. So there's a full balance. You see, in Islam there's a full balance, and all of this has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah. I have one more question and one more kind of dynamic to explore very quickly. I've seen a fatwa from Sayed Sistani. He mentions that if you have a permanent wife that is Muslim and you want to do temporary marriage with a Kitabi woman, you must ask the permission of the Muslim wife. What kind of dynamic is that? Is that with regards to her having a higher status due to her religion? And if somebody wanted to do temporary marriage with a Muslim woman, does that mean you don't need permission? Like how does that dynamic work specifically?
First of all, Sayyid Sistani, he differentiates between temporary and permanent marriage with a non-Muslim. He allows temporary marriage, but doesn't allow permanent. And as for a person who's already married to a Muslim, he requires his Muslim wife's permission to perform temporary marriage, which is not going to be given, obviously. And as for permanent marriage with a non-Muslim, even with her permission, he doesn't allow it. Even if she were to permit him, Sayyid Sistani doesn't allow it. Other scholars like Shaykh al-Fayyad, Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim, they allow both temporary and permanent to a non-Muslim without the wife's permission. Here there are narrations. There are narrations that discuss this, and if I remember correctly, there's a problem with the sanad of the narration, where Sayyid Sistani accepts it and the others don't accept it. I know there's a debate. It's been a while since I've reviewed this topic, and I've even written on it in my book, Fiqh al-Mar'a. It's a 3-volume book on the legal rulings pertaining to women in Islam, and this was one of the topics. So, for example, Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim, he does not require the Muslim wife's permission, but Sayyid Sistani does. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you very much, Sayyid. It's been a very insightful discussion. Learned a lot, benefited a lot. I'm sure that the viewers have benefited. Also, Sayyid Ali, I think, has a message from our dear brother Ahmed.
I do. Brother Ahmed, who's not here, sent a message. He said if we can play it on the podcast. Here we go.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Hope you're well. I'm missing you a lot. Wish I could be there. Unfortunately, I'm not. I'm recovering from a small medical procedure, and alhamdulillah, things are going well for those who have messaged. So thank you so much. Thank you to Sayed Ali and Mohamed Ali for filling in and doing an amazing job, I'm sure. Can't wait to hear the episode. And of course, I also wanted to thank Sayed Hossein for taking the time to be with us, to impart his wisdom, his knowledge with us. We've benefited greatly from his majalis in London, and I'm sure everyone at home will enjoy this episode as well, inshallah. It really means a lot to us all, so thank you for being here with us. Well, being with the guys, I should say, not with me. But inshallah, we'll get to meet soon. I think this is the last episode for the season, and then we will be back early 2025. I will, inshallah, be at the event, so I hope to see everyone there in London on the 11th of January. But if not, then inshallah, we will be back with some more episodes in the next few weeks, I hope. Take care, everyone.
That's nice of him.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed.
We wish him a full recovery, inshallah.
Inshallah. And saying that, I would like to thank you for giving us your time. I felt it was a truly profound, insightful discussion, and I'm sure those listening and watching at home have benefited from something. And please, if you know a friend or you know a family member or someone who wants answers to some of the questions and the points we discussed today, share this episode with them, inshallah, so that they can benefit from it too.
Inshallah. Yeah, bro, you've covered it all.
Sense of that.
It was a pleasure and honor. Thank you so much for hosting me on your show. I wish you all the best, and I wish to see the After Maghrib podcast grow bigger and bigger, inshallah. You've had a great influence, and you have a wide viewership, and I wish you all the best, inshallah.
Thank you. With your du'as, inshallah, we can take After Maghrib to the next level. I just want to thank everyone who's been part of this journey over the last few months throughout season 3, and for all of those who have supported us from season 1 and season 2. Don't miss us. Pray for us. If you support our work, if you want to see us grow, become a partner, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and don't forget, inshallah, to book your tickets for our upcoming event. We'd love to see you there. I personally love to see you there. On behalf of the entire team, we would love to see you there, inshallah. If you're in London on Saturday, the 11th of January, get your tickets on aftermaghrib.com/book and use code AMFamily to get 20% off. I think that's it now for the next few weeks. It's been an amazing season. Thank you, Sayyidina, Sayyid Hossein, Sayyid Mushtaba, and everyone after Maghrib, Sayyid Muhammad, Hajj Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.